Welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, hi, my name is Gabby. If you're old here, you better be wearing sunscreen every day. The sun is no joke, y'all. Anyways, today we are going to be doing a mid-year reading wrap-up. I honestly have not read as much as I would have liked to have read this year, and so I wasn't going to embarrass myself doing a wrap-up every month. I think I've done maybe one this year so far. But my goal for the year is to read 50 books. It's the same reading goal I had as last year. I think it's a sustainable goal for me with how much I work and, you know, just live my life. So far I have read 16 books this year, so we'll go through each of them, give a brief synopsis, and I'll give you guys my reading. Then I'll give you guys the behind the scenes of my Goodreads and show you all the books that I have started and have not finished this year. And then we'll go into what I would like to read in the rest of the year. Very quickly before we get into all the books that I've read this year, for those of you who are new to the channel, I don't do a 5-star rating system. I do a letter grading system because it just makes more sense to my neurospicy brain. So I literally give it A, B, C, D, plus and minus as well. So if you're new here, just get adjusted to that. The first book I read this year was In a New York Minute by Kate Spencer. I believe I want to say that I gave this book a B. I don't really remember what I rated it. It is a meet cute, it's a romance, it takes place in New York. Essentially our main character, another thing if you're new, I never remember anybody's name, so we're not even going to try. The FMC is basically having like the worst day of her life. She just got fired. She gets her dress ripped on the subway. A very nice man gives her his blazer, and then they are interviewed on national television because their moment kind of went viral. Somebody like took a picture and put it on their Instagram and it went viral. That went viral, and then they kind of start their friendship that obviously eventually morphs into a relationship. I thought it was really cute. I really enjoyed it, and it makes me really want to read other books by Kate Spencer. Then I read The Assassin's Blade by Sarah J. Maas, which is technically, chronologically, the first book in the Throne of Glass series. However, in publication order, I believe it's the third book because it's a prequel of what happens before book 1, but it was published after, I want to say, book 2. So I read it first so that I could get into that, but it basically follows our main character as she goes through a bunch of different trials. I don't want to speak about any of it because I don't know how much of it is a spoiler for the following books because I have not continued the Throne of Glass series since. I'm still on book 1. She goes through like a handful of different trials and it follows her through that, and then basically the book ends where a year before the first book starts, where Throne of Glass starts. I really enjoyed our FMC. I think that she's a really good representation of just like somebody, a female who like knows what she's doing and like is confident in her own ability, and she's a little bit cocky because she's young, but it's not like overtly so. And so I really enjoyed her. It really endeared me to her, and it made me really intrigued to read Throne of Glass. I've been having trouble reading the first book because honestly I just haven't been able to get into it, but because I've already read the prequel and I know I really enjoy her character and her character development from what I can tell so far, I want to get through it. It's like encouraging me to get through the rest of Throne of Glass, but I haven't done it yet. I gave Assassin's Blade, I don't think I gave it anything just because it is a bunch of novellas inside of the prequel, and so I just didn't think it's fair to give a rating to a book that's technically like 4 or 5 different books inside. Then I read Beartown by Fredrik Backman. I read this on a cruise, and I think because I like literally never put it down, it affected me in a way that I have never felt with a book before. This book is definitely, to me, it's an A- because it's not like the perfect book. It's not what you would call like a 5-star read, which to me would be like an A+. It's an A-. Definitely check trigger warnings if you're wanting to read this book. They've made a show about it on HBO Max as well, but I will not be watching that. But essentially it follows this town in Canada called Beartown, and the town is basically obsessed with hockey, and it follows a couple of the students who are on the hockey team and also in the high school, and how all of their lives mesh together. And I think it was a really poignant example of how when a community is bolstering this one thing and kind of like attaches all of their identity and their pride and their resources to this one thing, how much the success of that thing or the failure of that thing can really affect the entire community. Oh, I think they're cutting the grass. Hopefully you can't hear that, but we're gonna keep going. But it really makes or breaks the entire community because they're all kind of balanced on top of the precarious nature of like whether or not this hockey team does well. So there are really complex and adult topics and conflicts that happen in this book. I highly recommend it. I think that all of these characters, I fully felt like they were real people. I really came to love and to know them, and I could not give higher praise to this book. But like I said, because it was just so intense, and that's not my typical style of reading, I just can't give it like the perfect 5-star, you know? Then I read the sequel to that book called Us Against You. I'm not going to talk too much about it because it would be a very big spoiler for the first book, but it follows a couple characters from the main story that were more side characters comparatively, and it follows them kind of into their next phase of life, and it also really kind of hinges on hockey as well, and like how hockey in this different sense is now affecting their lives and how they're kind of moving forward from all of the conflicts that happened in the first book and moving on with their lives, but like not really. I think it goes deeper into side characters in the sense that like a lot of them have built their lives upon these assumptions that this is the only thing that they're good at, or this is the only thing that they're capable of doing, or this is how we do things because this is how they've always been done, and kind of breaking down that and how they are essentially gonna continue on with their lives now. That was good as well. I would say I give that a B. I believe I read it directly after reading Beartown, and I think just, again, the intensity of the two novels was just a little bit too much to me, and I wasn't as endeared to the side characters as I was to the characters in the main book, and so it didn't have that same emotional effect on me, but I still really enjoyed it. Then I read Happy Place by Emily Henry. Emily Henry strikes again. This for me is an A+ perfect book. I am obsessed with this book. If you've been watching the channel for a while, you know that I love Emily Henry in general, but I will say this is definitely my favorite because of the way that she discusses, number one, coming into adulthood, number two, finding yourself in relationship to your friends' expectations, your family's expectations, your personal expectations, and sometimes the expectation that may go unsaid within your romantic relationships as well. I think that she did a really good job of discussing all of these things in a way that didn't feel heavy, and I really felt like I knew Harriet and Win as people. Win not as much as Harriet, because Harriet's the main character, but I really felt like even though Win and the other characters were side characters, they were still fleshed out enough to feel like real people to me and not just like side characters that I feel that happens kind of a lot in romance books, that if you're not one of the main two, like you're kind of like a one-note type of character. But I think that Harriet is really trying to discover who she is, who she wants to be, and she's kind of stuck in this rhythm of like, I have put my whole life towards this specific thing, and what if that specific thing isn't necessarily what I want anymore? And that's really scary. And I just think that as kind of a commentary on coming into your own and growing into adulthood, this was the perfect book. I loved Happy Place by Emily Henry. And I read Happily Never After by Lynn Painter. This was my first Lynn Painter book, and this is technically her adult like genre because she's primarily young adult from what I understand. The premise of this book is that the main character does not want to get married to her fiancé anymore because she found out that her fiancé is cheating on her. But her fiancé's dad is her dad's boss, so there's no good way for her to break up with him without like ruining everybody's life. And so they hire a wedding objector, and the objector comes to the wedding, objects the wedding, says, oh, he's been cheating on her, XYZ, whatever. And basically gets her out of her marriage. So then the objector and the ex-bride become friends and become like an objector duo. This obviously is a friends to lovers because hello, how can you go to a million weddings with somebody and not fall in love with them? But it also obviously goes into like their backstories and their will they, won't they, should they, shouldn't they, and I really enjoyed it. I will say I gave this either a B- or like a solid C, and I know that sounds bad, but in my eyes like a C is like a perfectly neutral score because there was spice in a way that I thought was completely unnecessary, didn't move the plot along, didn't like enhance their relationship. It just made it seem like really physical in a way that I didn't think the characters needed, and I thought did a disservice to their relationship. Because of that, and just because I think and have heard such incredible things about Lynn Painter and was kind of like, oh, like this could have been better. I gave that a solid C. Then we read another book about a wedding, and I read, actually these might not be in order now that I'm thinking about it. That doesn't matter. But I remember after reading Happily Never After, I read Something Borrowed by Emily Giffin. This book, y'all, was so good. I believe I gave it a B+. It wasn't like the best book I've ever read. However, if you could put reality TV into a book, that's what it was. Like, it was essentially like, this is the event that happened, and then here's inside her mind. And so, you know, the quick and fast of it is that this girl falls in love with her best friend's fiance. And then they spend the night together. And so the whole book you were like, what is going to happen? And then it turns out that her best friend is kind of a wench. Not in like the intentional wenchy way, just more like the self-centered wenchy way. And so you're like, okay, well now I don't even want this guy to be with her. And it was just so dramatic, not in a way that like spiked my anxiety and made me really nervous, but just in the way of like, I don't know what's going to happen. But I think one of the really great things about this, and that what kept it from being really like shallow essentially, was that because we are in the mind of the main character, her thought process through all of this is, number one, like really realistic of the whole situation, but when you come to realize that this crush is not necessarily about the guy, I mean it obviously is about the guy, but there is so much more that she's discovering through this situation and realizing about herself and kind of the way that she has decided to present herself in the world, and she's kind of realizing like, hey, I've been kind of selling myself short this whole time. Like, what is going on? And I think that self-discovery mixed with the drama of this conflict made it so good. Then I read Little Women. Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. I'm not going to rate this because it's a classic. I did love it, obviously, because I'm just a girly who loves classics about women and female friendships and sisters, because I don't have sisters, I only have brothers. So I really enjoyed that. But I love the Little Women movie. I've read Little Women before, but as I continue to get older, I resonate with these characters in a way that I just could not previously, and they are so well fleshed out. They're such complete women, and even in the younger characters of, for example, like Amy and Beth, the way that you see them develop and the empathy that I've developed for them as an adult woman now, and seeing them kind of in the light of like, oh, my sweet younger sister, they are just, it's a wonderful commentary on becoming a woman and kind of the place that these women are wanting to make for themselves in the world, and how not all women have the same aspirations, and that is perfectly okay. And it's just finding the balance between familial duty and what your heart desires, and just the complexities of the world that they lived in. I'm obsessed with it. Obsessed. If anybody has a really cute edition of Little Women, please let me know. I read it on Kindle, and I want to get a really nice edition for my personal collection. Drop it in the comments. Then I read Book Lovers by Emily Henry as well. I really enjoyed Book Lovers. It is an enemies to lovers, but more in the sense of like misunderstood enemies, because I think his name is Charlie, is an editor, and Nora is a book agent. And so she has kind of written Charlie off as being like the shark. I think that's what they call him in like in the publishing world. They're both just very strong personalities, and Charlie is more so reserved, where Nora is like going to tell you exactly how she feels. And so it creates this conflict in their personalities that I think was really interesting for them to work through as a conflict. But essentially, Nora and Charlie know each other. They're kind of like enemies, and then Nora goes on a month-long vacation to a small town, and Charlie is in the small town. And you're like, she's like, what are you doing here? And he's like, what are you doing here? And then it's like a whole thing. So their relationship develops as well. I think the third act conflict was also a very realistic conflict as well, and I liked that. I didn't love how they resolved the conflict in the end, because I thought the resolution was a little bit unrealistic, but every book has its flaws. So I think I would give this like B-. Then I read Caraval, book 1 of the Caraval series by Stephanie Garber. I read this because I want to read the Once Upon a Broken Heart series, And I was told that if you read Caraval before Once Upon a Broken Heart, it gives you a much better idea of the characters. And so I read Caraval. I want to say I gave this a B when I read it. I read this in my vacation reading blog. It's YA. And so it's like, at the end of the day, it's like not meant for me because I'm an adult woman. But I really like the premise of Caraval. Essentially, our main character Scarlet has always wanted to go to Caraval. It's like a immersive carnival challenge experience that's hosted every single year, and it's like a magical in a world where magic kind of no longer exists. And I really enjoyed the story and the plot of it all and the pacing of it. I definitely think that the characters outside of our FMC could have been more developed, and that would have made the story a little bit more gripping. And the pacing was really fast, but again, it's young adult, so it's also not for me. But I did really enjoy it, so much so that I read Legendary. I didn't read these back to back, but I'll just talk about it because I'm talking about the series. I read Legendary, and this follows a secondary character from the first book, and again, they're going to Caraval again in this book as well, and you get to know a little bit more about the lore of Legend and him, like how he's created it, and it's less about the main character and more about kind of the quest to discover who Legend is. And some of the magic in this world is discussed a little bit deeper, and why the magic exists and whether or not the magic should still exist and all of those. I can't really discuss the main conflict because it really gives a lot away. But again, this was like a B minus. I definitely didn't like it as, I think a B minus. I definitely didn't like it as much as Caraval, just because I felt like even our main character, like, I didn't really know much about them, and so I couldn't really connect to them, and for that reason the storyline was like interesting because I want to know who Legend is, but not as interesting as it could have been, if that makes sense. So a B minus for Legendary. Then I read, what did I read next? Oh, None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. Y'all, A. This is an A. Not an A plus, I don't think, because it was like, I was like, oh. But Lisa Jewell writes more like eerie, makes you feel icky on the inside, whereas my preference personally is like thriller, like, oh, no, oh, no. And so it just couldn't be like an A plus for me, but it is so good, y'all. And I posted on my Instagram story that I loved this book and that everybody should read it. And Lisa Jewell, oh my god, for a second, the pull quote was from Lucy Foley, and I was like, am I shouting about the wrong author? No. Lisa Jewell replied to my Instagram story, and she was like, I love that you love it, blah, blah, blah. I don't remember exactly what she said, but I was like, but so good. Essentially, this follows these two women, Alex and, I want to say her name's Jane, Josie. But it follows Jane and Josie. They're both born on the same day. They're the same age. They meet on their birthday in the bathroom of a restaurant, bar, I don't remember. But Josie is just like this woman who's like kind of eccentric and doesn't really have much going on in her life, and Alex is a podcaster who is like really successful, kind of like this larger than life personality, and Josie kind of becomes like, for lack of a better term, like obsessed with her, but in like a not cool way, like a not normal way. But Josie essentially convinces Alex that she has a story that needs to be told. So as Alex continues to interview Josie and we continue to see into Josie's mind and into Alex's mind, it becomes like this really distorted, like the main thing that I love about this book is that it's one of those where once you finish reading, it's kind of up to the reader to decide what the truth was of all of the stories and versions of the stories that we've heard from all the different characters, and that is my favorite because then it's like, okay, well, what was the truth? Like, I'm just never gonna know. It kind of leaves you thinking. And I honestly don't know how to discuss it without giving it all away because I just love every single part of it. So if you guys want a full breakdown on this book, let me know and we can go literally chapter by chapter and chat about it because it was insane. But all that to say, I really enjoyed it. I will say Lisa Jewell's writing pacing is a little bit slower than what I would like in a thriller, but because it kind of, she's in that slow pacing, she kind of stirs up all of these like uneasy feelings. It makes it worth reading because you're like, well, I just have to know what happens. None of this is true, but it's a jewel. Then I read Today, Tonight, Tomorrow by Rachel Lynn Solomon. This was just on Kindle Unlimited. I was browsing, the concept sounded interesting, and I was like, okay, why not? By the way, drinking a matcha, cutest koozie from All Things Lillian. I love all of her products. I just do not have the money to buy all of them. Love, love, love. But I read Today, Tonight, Tomorrow, and it basically follows these two friends, Rowan and Neil, and they have been academic rivals, and so it's an academic rivals to lovers. I thought from like the way that the synopsis was written that it was going to span their high school experience, but it really focuses on this one weekend of senior year. It's the last weekend of senior year, and they basically like have the last assembly of school, and then they do something called the Howl, which if I don't know if this is like an American thing or like a Florida thing, but in high school we had this game called Assassin, and in this book they call it the Howl. But essentially, if you decide to play Assassin, you put up a certain amount of money. I think for my school it was like $5, something like that. And at my school, so describe my experience at my school, everybody has a water gun. You have to get your water gun, and you give $5, and then the people who are running it assign you a target. And once you get your target, then their target becomes your target. So for example, if I spray my friend Gabby, and Gabby's target is Rachel, now my target is Rachel. So whoever is the last people standing wins. But anyway, that concept is what happens in this book, and that's what we follow throughout this. And essentially what happens is Rowan and Neil are academic rivals, and they realize that like, okay, if they want to win, they kind of have to team up for this Howl thing so that they can make sure that they win and nobody else does. And so they team up, and their story follows from there. It was cute. This is going to be controversial, but I did not like Rowan. She's our main character. She's the only POV we get. I would have loved to see Neil's POV, but Rowan to me was like, she was like girl boss in the most annoying way. She was like, it was very much like victimizing energy, like the whole world is against her, she can't catch a break, Neil is the worst person ever. Like, she's just so caught up in this idea that like everyone is out to get her, when that truly just like was not the reality of the situation. And I also think that having multiple cultural identities or multiple things that you use to identify yourself in the world, so for example Rowan's would be like, she's Jewish, she's an academic, she wants to be a writer, and I think that's a lot of that when you are not confident in yourself becomes a really easy way to say that everyone is against you because of those things, as opposed to like maybe just the fact that you were a bad friend or you're really self-centered. And I think that sometimes a lot of those things are used as a way to kind of shield yourself from taking accountability of your other actions and other things that may be contributing, in addition to people treating you a certain way because of the stereotype. And I just think that she was very much like, girls need to be respected and women can do whatever they want, and kind of like yelling at the reader, which for me was like, yeah, girl, I know, I'm a woman, like whatever, target audience not me, clearly. But it was just like, it was feminism in a way that felt very performative, and with all of those things considered, it just really detracted from the book, because there would be great scenes, and then she would go kind of like on a tyrannistic monologue, and I was like, Rowan, girl, relax. I get it. Like, I just think that they could have been handled with more subtlety, or could have been placed into real world examples, or real world book examples, so that we could see how she navigates that and has those conversations, and it would have been, number one, a lot more applicable to real life, but number two, just like a better way to have that conversation. And unfortunately I think that it really just dropped the ball there. So I'm not going to be giving this book a rating. It was good. If you want to read it, go ahead. I really enjoyed like the whole Howl subplot and the subplot of the enemies to lovers, because their relationship grows really gradually, even though all of the events take course over a weekend. So their relationship pacing was really nice, but again, just for that reason, not really my favorite, not really my vibe. Then I read The Fault in Our Stars and Twilight. If you want to see my reviews on these, which honestly I didn't even really give them reviews, because again, both of these books, and like I said in that video, both of these books are a product of their time. They are not for me now, because this was published in what, 2008 I think it was. This was published in 2012. And I think this was published in 2008. So they were very much a product of their time. It was very much Like, teen romance was taking over the world. Everybody was so, like, honestly pretentious and just ridiculous, and it was just an amazing time in culture and in literature. But it's just like, we are not in that place in the world right now, and these books don't necessarily resonate with me. I think that they were good for what they were at the time. I think with The Fault in Our Stars, I'm not a 14-year-old girl anymore. When I was a 14-year-old girl, I really enjoyed this book. Now that I'm an adult, I think it's ridiculous, and it was like kind of wasting my time to read. With Twilight, again, when I was a 15-year-old girl, obsessed with this. As an adult, I'm like, Bella! Get up off the ground, girl! That's how I feel. I will be reading the rest of the series, so if anybody wants to see that, let me know, and I'll make more reading vlogs about that. But no reading, because it's just, they're not for me, and they were never written for me, like, you know, at this time in my life. And so that's all I have to say. They were fine. I like the movies better. That's that. The last one I read was King of Wrath by Ana Huang. I don't know how to pronounce that. I apologize if I mispronounced it. And this was a arranged marriage, forced proximity, enemies to lovers book. This, I did not read for the plot. I didn't read it for the spice either. I really just wanted a palate cleanser. And I love enemies to lovers. I love forced proximity. And I had never, well, I've read arranged marriage before, but not in like a literal arranged marriage sense that happens in this book. Their character development was like fine, but again, I read it for the vibes, and so no rating for that one either. I enjoyed it. If you don't really like spice like me, there was a lot of skipping to be done. But I also love, I didn't realize until I had read this book, I love reading a billionaire romance. Like, okay, go spend $12,000 just because you can. Like, hello, my dream. And so yeah, I really just read it for the billionaire vibes because I really enjoyed that. This is also the first book in a series. I don't know what, I think the entire series is referred to as the Kings of Sin or King of Sin series, because each book is titled after like a biblical sin. So this one's Wrath, there's another one that's Pride. I don't know what the rest of them are called because I think that only 3 of them are out so far. But I think the King of, oh, I'm not going to remember this. Let me look it up. Okay. The third book is called King of Greed, and King of Greed is the reason why I read King of Wrath outside of just the plot, I mean not the plot, the vibes, because I saw on TikTok a quote from King of Greed and I was like, I need to read that book. Because that book is essentially, from what I understand, about people who were married for a long time, but they're thinking about getting a divorce because he can't stop working and she needs him. And the quote that I was reading was like, the most intense level of like understanding of what you've done wrong and yearning for a chance to change, that I was like, sign me up for that one, girl. So that's why I read King of Wrath. And that's all I've read in the past 6 months. Now let's very quickly go into the books that I started and didn't finish. The first of those being Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross. I did not DNF this on purpose. I just want everybody to know, as we know, I love Ruthless Vows. I'm sorry, not Ruthless Vows. I love Divine Rivals, and I was so excited for Ruthless Vows to come out. I am buddy reading this with a friend. Please, I missed the straw. I am buddy reading this with a friend who, unfortunately, is the slowest reader on planet Earth, and we still have not finished. I am on page, I want to say, yep, 234. I am going to have to restart this and finish reading it. I think I'm going to do that sometime this month because I remembered that this existed and was like, hey, I should finish that. So that's where we're at with Ruthless Vows. I also started and did not finish Divergent. In that video where I did The Fault in Our Stars and a Twilight reread, I was going to originally do Divergent instead of The Fault in Our Stars, and I just could not get behind Veronica Roth's writing because Tris was bothering me too much. And you'd think that that would, for the same reason, I would stop reading Twilight, because all I did while reading Twilight was complain about Bella. But it didn't, because I'm a Twilight girly. I also started a reread of Beach Read by Emily Henry. I got literally 230 pages in as well, so like 2/3 of the way. I obviously really enjoyed Beach Read the first time I read it, so I wanted to read it again, and for some reason I just could not get in. Literally hit myself in the face with the book. And for some reason I just could not get into it again. I think maybe because I read it at like the very start of summer, which for me was like the end of May. And I think now that we're in true summer, I might enjoy it more, but I just never got around to finishing it, which I don't know if that's like I don't really like the book anymore or I just wasn't in the mood, but yeah. I also DNF'd The Winners, which is the third book in the Beartown series. Too intense. I tried to read it right after book 2 and I was like, I need a break from these people, so maybe someday I'll get back to reading that. I also started Hello Stranger by Catherine Center because I loved The Bodyguard. I hated the main character of Hello Stranger, and so I had to put it down after like 50 pages. And I also started and did not finish The Humans by Matt Haig. I started that book in the same reading blog that I read Caraval, so you can go hear more about what I did and didn't like about that book, but I just was not in the sci-fi mood for it, honestly, and so I put that down. Now, moving into my TBR for the next 6 months. This is not an exhaustive TBR because we all know that when fall comes, I'm going to have a whole other TBR as well because I am a fall fantasy, romance girly in the fall. Where some people are like horror thriller, I'm horror thriller in the summer and romance in the fall. If you want to follow me on Goodreads, I believe my username is just Gabby Bloom, the same as it is on YouTube. So you guys can go ahead and check that out as well. But I obviously want to continue reading Throne of Glass. I'm in the middle of book 1. Not in the middle. I'm like 70 pages into book 1. So I would like to finish and continue that series. I picked up The Book Thief from the thrift store, and I remember reading that as a middle schooler and not knowing that it was better than what I could grasp at the time. So I want to reread it and do that. I also have Artemis by Andy Weir that I've been dying to read, but for some reason I'm just not in a sci-fi mood lately. I also want to continue the Magnolia Parks series. I'm like looking all around because I literally have books all over my room. I want to continue the Magnolia Parks series because Magnolia was like not my fave girly. Again, reality TV in a book, loved the book, but I have heard that if you're not necessarily a Magnolia girly, you're probably a Daisy girly, and I want to find out. Also, Keaton Milburn did a Magnolia Parks reading vlog, and it was so entertaining that I was like, when she posted that she was reading book 2, I was like, oh, I have to read the book so that I can watch her video. I want to read Red String Theory by Lauren Jesson. If you're familiar with Invisible String Theory, Red String Theory essentially saying that like people are soulmates attached by a string, and throughout the courses of our lives we slowly get pulled together. Oh, The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna, because everyone's in the Kristen Hanna era and saying that she's like the best writer ever. Just kind of Kristen Hanna in general. I want to get more into historical fiction because in my experience all I've really read is World War II historical fiction, and obviously there's a lot more to history. I'm currently reading on Kindle, I don't remember what it's called, it's by Amy Harmon, and it is a historical fiction based around the Oregon Trail, but within the first 30 pages there was literally like a massacre. And I was like, whoa. So I've given that one a quick breather. I'm also currently reading book 1 of the Bridgerton series, The Duke and I am anticipating that I'm going to continue reading that because I love the Bridgerton show, but I've also really enjoyed reading the book. Apparently it's very long. I don't know how many pages it is, but I feel like I was only 20% in and I had already read 100 pages, so obviously like it's very long, but it didn't feel very long to me. So I think that it's going to be something that I continue to enjoy. I want to reread The Weston Game. This is a deep cut. If you guys read this, I read this in 5th grade, I want to say, 5th grade English class. And we did a whole project on it. It was like a whole big thing because there are so many deeper themes, and it's like, and I don't know, for some reason it like really lodged itself in my subconscious. So when I saw it on the Goodreads, I don't know for what reason it was on my Goodreads feed, but I was like, oh, I have to read that again. So that was there. I want to read Powerless. Oh my gosh, I have to read Powerless by Lauren Roberts before the second book comes out, which I believe is called Reckless. She also released a novella called Powerful, and everyone's been saying, everyone speaks so highly of Lauren Roberts. I just cannot get behind buying hardcover books. I'm not going to pay $20 for hardcover books. And so obviously I just need to read it on Kindle, but I've been too lazy to buy it. Oh my gosh, there are so many other books that are literally on my shelf from my reading haul that I did last year on my birthday. If you guys want to go watch that video kind of popped off, not to brag. but I did like a $200 reading, a $200 Barnes haul, and I still have not read half of those. So there's like Babel, what else is over there? Time Enough for Love. I don't even know, honestly, because there were so many that I still haven't read, and I reorganized my bookshelves in a way that like I regret now, and so I can't even see what I'm looking for. But there's just so much. I also want to read, it's over here, If He Had Been With Me by Laura Nowlin, because everyone says that books make them cry, and I don't think I've ever had a book make me cry. And so I'm like ready. Maybe I should do a reading vlog of like trying to cry while reading a book. I don't know. I also have Finale by Stephanie Garber to finish out the Caraval series so that I can move on to the Once Upon a Broken Heart series, which is also on my list. Like I said earlier, I want to continue reading Twilight. I have The Sun Is Also a Star. I can't see who the author is at this moment, but I want to read that as well. That's YA. What else are big ones that I've been wanting to read? I think those are the main ones. I really want to this year focus on finishing series that I'm in the middle of, and that primarily is Throne of Glass, Magnolia Parks, the Caraval / Once Upon a Broken Heart series, and Twilight, obviously. And yeah, we'll see how that goes. Hopefully at the end of the year I'll have a very successful end of year reading wrap up. Maybe we can watch this video again and see, kind of compare notes at the end of the year. But I'm so excited to get into reading. I've really been in like my "is that dang phone" era. Like I need to get off the phone because I'm on it way too much and like obsessed in a way that's unhealthy. So I'm about to kickstart my reading era again. Not that I ever left, but we're about to be a hardcore reader. And I'm really excited. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please let me know your favorite books that you read in the past 6 months, because obviously I'm going to add them to my never-ending TBR, which, not to mention, and I know for a fact, that I have another TBR on my Notes app, another TBR on my Notion app, and obviously my TBR on Goodreads, which I did not scroll completely through. So if you guys want to see a video of like my exhaustive, complete list of my TBR, let me know and we can go through all of those. But let me know what your favorite book of the last 6 months was, because obviously maybe I'll add it to my TBR. If there were any of the books that I spoke about in this video that you really enjoyed, really hated, I just love to hear other people's opinions. I love to hear it. So drop those in the comments as well. I hope you have an amazing day whenever you're watching this, whether it's day or night. I just hope you have the most blessed, amazing, wonderful day of your life. If you want to follow me on Instagram, I'm at Books with Bloom over there. On Goodreads, I'm Gabby Bloom as well. YouTube, Gabby Bloom. Share it with a friend. Share it with your mom. I know my mom might be watching. My brothers are always watching. Thanks, guys. Anyway, I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!